classroom was supposed to be a safe place, filled with colors, laughter, and lessons that shaped young minds. But on that day, silence hung heavy, broken only by the small voice of a 6-year-old girl. Her face twisted with discomfort, her hand resting on her side as though shielding a secret too big for her tiny body. Her teacher knelt, eyes wide with concern, asking gently what was wrong. And the answer the child gave would change everything. The classroom walls seemed to shrink as her words echoed, chilling and raw. The teacher's heart pounded, confusion, disbelief, and sorrow blending together in an instant. This wasn't something an innocent child should ever have had to say. In that moment, she realized silence was no longer an option, and with trembling hands, she picked up the phone to call the police. It had started like any other morning in the cheerful classroom. The children had scattered crayons across their desks, filling papers with bright shapes of suns, houses, and stick-figure families. The air smelled faintly of pencil shavings and chalk dust, a world far removed from hardship. Yet among the sea of smiling faces sat a girl whose eyes held a quiet storm. She was small, dressed in a faded pink dress, her hair tied neatly as though someone wanted her to appear fine. But appearances could not hide the truth. As the teacher walked around, praising drawings and correcting letters, she noticed the girl shifting uncomfortably, pressing her hand to her side. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly, kneeling beside her. The girl hesitated, her lips trembling. "It hurts," she whispered, eyes brimming with unshed tears. At first, the teacher thought it might be a simple stomachache, something harmless. But the way the child looked at the floor, refusing to meet her gaze, told another story. This was not ordinary pain. This was a burden carried in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to notice. The teacher gently pressed, her tone careful, kind. "Where does it hurt? Did you fall?" The little girl shook her head, her fingers gripping her dress tightly. The room around them blurred, the noise of children laughing fading into the background. At that moment, it felt like the world held its breath. The child leaned closer, her voice barely audible, as though sharing a forbidden secret. "It hurts when—" She paused, tears slipping down her cheeks. The teacher's chest tightened. She waited, not rushing her, not forcing her. And then the words came, words no 6-year-old should ever have to form. They were heavy, broken, carrying truths too cruel for innocence. The teacher froze, the weight of those words sinking into her soul. She tried to remain calm, to keep her voice steady, but inside her heart screamed. The child wasn't just in physical pain. She was trapped in something darker, something terrifying. And in that instant, the teacher knew this was no ordinary classroom problem. This was a cry for help that demanded action. Immediately, the teacher wrapped her arms gently around the child, shielding her from curious glances. Her mind raced, fear and determination colliding. What had she just heard? Could it really be true? The thought alone made her tremble. But looking into the girl's tear-filled eyes, she knew. Children did not invent pain so deep, nor words so heavy. She whispered reassurance, promising she was safe now. But safety could not come from words alone. Something had to be done. Rising slowly, she walked the girl to a quiet corner, distracting the class with a simple drawing game to keep them occupied. Then, with trembling hands, she picked up the phone in the corner of the room. Her fingers dialed the familiar 3 numbers, 911. Her voice shook as she explained. She was a teacher, she had a student, and what she had heard required immediate attention. The operator's tone shifted instantly, from routine calm to urgent. Help was on the way. And in that moment, the teacher felt both terrified and relieved. Terrified for the truth that would soon be revealed, but relieved that silence would no longer protect it. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet neighborhood. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the classroom windows, startling the children who had been blissfully unaware. Curious faces pressed against the glass, whispering questions the teacher couldn't answer yet. She held the girl close, whispering soothing words, though her own hands shook. The officers entered, their expressions grave but gentle. One knelt down, speaking to the girl with a kindness that belied his uniform. She hesitated at first, clinging to the teacher's arm, but slowly words spilled out. The classroom no longer felt like a place of learning. It had become a stage for truth. The officers listened, their eyes darkening as the story unfolded. The teacher felt tears sting her eyes, but she held them back. She had to be strong for the child. As the words painted a picture too painful to imagine, the decision was made. This little girl would not return home that night. She would not face the shadows that had caused her pain. That day marked the beginning of a different journey, one toward safety, justice, and healing. The teacher watched as the officers carefully escorted the girl away, their movements protective, almost tender. She felt torn, relief that the child was finally safe, sorrow that it had taken so long for someone to notice. Questions haunted her. How many times had this little girl cried silently in class? How many mornings had she walked in with a brave smile, hiding wounds no one could see? The thought made her heart ache. She vowed never again to overlook the quiet ones, the ones who sat silently at their desks while chaos swirled around them. As the classroom returned to a fragile normal, she addressed the children gently, telling them everything was okay. But in her heart, she knew nothing would ever be the same. That night, she couldn't sleep. The child's words echoed in her mind, haunting her dreams. But alongside the sorrow was a spark of hope, because she had acted, because she had listened. That little girl's story would no longer be buried in silence. Days turned into weeks and news trickled back. The girl was placed into protective care, surrounded by people who understood, who listened, who cared. For the first time, she slept without fear. For the first time, she smiled freely, no longer guarding herself against the world. The teacher visited when she could, bringing books, crayons, and gentle hugs. Each visit felt like stitching together the torn fabric of a fragile heart. The child's laughter, hesitant at first, grew brighter each time. Healing was slow, but it was happening. And though the road ahead was long, she was no longer walking it alone. The teacher often thought about how close she had come to missing the signs, to staying silent. But the choice she made that day, to listen, to believe, to act, had rewritten the little girl's story. And in doing so, it had changed her own. The teacher became an advocate, her heart burning with purpose. She attended trainings, spoke at community meetings, urging others to pay attention to the quiet cries. Children don't always shout their pain, she would say. Sometimes they whisper it in the way they hold themselves, in the silence behind their eyes. Her colleagues listened, moved by her passion. Parents, too, began to notice small things they once overlooked. The story of that 6-year-old girl spread quietly, not with names or details, but as a lesson. That vigilance saves lives, that compassion heals wounds, that silence can be as dangerous as cruelty. The teacher carried the memory with her always, not as a burden, but as a calling. The girl's pain had opened her eyes. The girl's courage had given her strength. And together, their stories intertwined, one of survival, the other of responsibility. Years passed and the girl grew stronger. She thrived in her new home, surrounded by people who cherished her. Her laughter returned, her dreams expanded, and her innocence, though scarred, began to bloom again. The teacher watched from a distance, proud and humbled. Every achievement the girl celebrated felt like a victory against the darkness that once tried to consume her. Every smile was proof that healing was possible. And in quiet moments, the teacher reflected on the day everything changed. She remembered the trembling hand on a pink dress, the whispered words that shattered silence, the phone call that set justice into motion. And she realized something powerful. Sometimes the smallest act, listening can alter the course of a life forever. Can alter the course of a life forever. The girl, now older, never forgot the teacher who believed her. To her, the teacher wasn't just an educator. She was a rescuer, a guardian, a light in her darkest moment. On graduation day, she handed her teacher a letter, words written with shaky hands but steady courage. It read, "Thank you for saving me. You didn't just call the police. You gave me back my life." The teacher wept openly, hugging the young woman tightly. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Together they had defied it. And as the crowd cheered, as caps flew into the air, both of them knew this was more than just an ending. It was a beginning, and so the story stands as a reminder for all of us. Pain often hides in plain sight, carried quietly by those too small to speak it aloud. But when someone listens, when someone believes, everything can change. The teacher's choice to act did not just protect a child, it ignited a chain of healing that echoed through years. The little girl who once stood trembling in a faded dress became a woman of courage, her scars transformed into strength. And the teacher, once haunted by the pain she witnessed, became a warrior for the voiceless. Together their story tells us this, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is pick up the phone. Sometimes the kindest act is to believe. And always, the greatest treasure is compassion. For it has the power not just to comfort, but to save. And so the classroom that once echoed with laughter carried the weight of a truth too heavy for a child to bear. The teacher's decision to call the police was not just an act of duty, it was an act of love, of courage, of standing in the gap for a little girl who had no voice. That day, the world began to change for her. No longer silenced by fear, she was given hope, protection, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The teacher could have looked away, pretending not to notice. He could have told himself it was none of his business. He could have walked past her pain, the way so many others had, but he didn't. That day, he chose to act. That day, he chose courage over comfort. He listened to the trembling voice of a child too small to carry such heavy secrets. And in that moment, her world began to change. The little girl looked up at him, unsure if she would finally be believed. Her eyes carried years of fear, years of silence, but his gaze held something she had never seen before. Safety, it was the first. Time her tears were not ignored. He did not see her as a burden. He did not see her as a problem to dismiss. He saw her as a child worthy of protection, worthy of love. And with that choice, he lit a spark in her broken heart. The police were called, and the truth began to unfold. Her pain was no longer hidden in the shadows. Her cries no longer echoed unheard, and though the road ahead was long, she no longer walked it alone. The teacher's compassion became her shield, his bravery became her strength, and together they broke the silence that had chained her for so long. One act of courage became the turning point of her life. This story is not just hers. It is a reminder to us all. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the deepest wounds, and it is our duty to listen. It is our duty to protect. Every child deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves to be heard, and every tear deserves an answer. Because silence protects the abuser, but action saves the innocent. The 6-year-old girl's courage met the teacher's compassion, and together they lit a beacon in the darkness. A beacon that says no child should suffer alone. A beacon that reminds us kindness can rewrite destiny. So if this story touched your heart, carry it forward. Share it, not only with words, but with action. Be the listener. Be the protector. Be the reason a child believes in kindness again. Because sometimes Saving a life begins with hearing one small voice.